One aspect of working with virtual machines that you need to be aware of are the files that it takes to make a virtual machine operate and what those files mean to you. So when you create a single virtual machine and you go out there and start to dig around on the host system's disk, you're going to notice a number of files out there. And what I want to talk about here is what these files are and what you can expect to have to do with them. Now, Workstation manages these files for you, but there's a couple of these files that occasionally you may need to go out there and take a look at. And some files that we're going to talk about here will only appear while the virtual machine is actually running. So if it's paused or if it's stopped, you may not see some of these. Okay, so let's go through this list. Now, a virtual machine, a single virtual machine, is made up of up to 10 different file types that you'll see out there. One of the first ones you're going to notice is the .log or the log file, and this is where the Workstation software logs activities about Workstation into this log file on that particular virtual machine. Now, this is useful in troubleshooting, and if you get into kind of some advanced troubleshooting situations, you can email this file to tech support, or you can read through tech support, read through this file along with tech support, and you can identify problems with the virtual machine. Now, the .log file is always going to be stored in the same directory as your VMX file, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, the .nvram file is what's used to store the state of the virtual machine's BIOS. That gives you a real big clue there that yes, you can work with the BIOS in a virtual machine. Then you're going to see a file out there called the ever popular VMDK. Now, this is what most of us know as the virtual disk file. This is the one that's going to get really large. This is where the contents of the virtual machine's hard disk drive is stored. This may be either one large file for whatever the total size, and you may set this at 40, 50, 60 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes. It can actually go up to 2 terabytes, or you can separate this VMDK file into multiple 2 gigabyte files. And in a separate video called VMDK file names, I'll tell you how these VMDK files can give you some clues as to how this thing was originally set up based on some of these file names. We'll get to that in a separate video entitled VMDK file names. Now, if the virtual machine is connected directly to a physical disk rather than to a virtual disk, the VMDK file stores information about the partitions that the virtual machine is allowed to access. And so you could see some differences in the size and the way this thing behaves. So the VMDK is either going to store the contents of the hard disk drive, or if you're pointing to a physical disk, it's going to kind of function as a pointer file, if you will. Now, the vmem file, the .vmem file, is the virtual machine's paging file. We talked about paging files in a different place in the course here, and we talked about how paging can be really detrimental in a virtual environment. And I even did a video entitled Understanding Page Faults, and that has to do with the paging file. Keep in mind the vmem file is going to exist only when the virtual machine is running or if it has crashed. And again, this can be used in troubleshooting. The .vmsd file is a centralized file that stores information about snapshots. The .vmsn file is the snapshot file itself. So when you start taking snapshots, there you go. And this stores the virtual machine's running state at the time you take the snapshot. And we'll dig into snapshots a little bit more in a different part of the course here. The .vmss file is the suspended state file. So if I suspend a virtual machine, the .vmss is going to store the state of that suspended virtual machine. The .vmtm file, this is a configuration file containing team data. But keep in mind, teams are no longer used in Workstation 8. We now just collect our machines that used to be on teams into a common folder. But you're still going to see this VMTM, especially until you convert those. And again, we'll talk about that in a separate video. The whole idea of teams and sharing and all that. Folders. Then the VMX file. Now this is probably the biggest file in importance for the user, along with the VMDK file. The VMDK file is what we normally think of as the virtual file because it's where the contents of the hard drive go. The VMX file is the primary configuration file for the virtual machine. And what you're going to see is from time to time you're going to want to do certain things to your virtual machine, or for example you're going to say, you know what, I tried to run a certain operating system on my virtual machine, it's throwing errors and stuff. You go out there into the forums on the VMware website and you'll see people say, go add this line to the VMX file, or go take this line off the VMX file. This stores settings that are chosen in the virtual machine wizard or the settings editor when you're out there working with your virtual machines and managing them. And again, let me just back up here, you can actually go out there and manually edit this file. Always make a copy of the original before you edit it, so you can get back to it in case your virtual machine won't run after you've been working on it. The .vmxf file is a supplemental configuration file for virtual machines that are in a team. Again, once you've converted your team away from being a team and just into a folders, this one's going to go away and you won't see it. But keep in mind, if you see these files about supplementals, configurations, and team files, the TM files and stuff, you will know that you're looking at a virtual machine that was at one time in a team. And if you bring this into H, you're going to have to convert it out and all those sorts of things. So there's a lot of files out there that you're going to have to deal with, and I just wanted you to be aware of them and understand all the different files that you may see involved with the operation of one single virtual machine.